I'm Bruce McGee, and Stephen hopefully will be joining us shortly. Oh, here he is right now. And we're here today with Audrey Gibson. Hey, Audrey.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I've been practicing. Hey, Stephen.
Howdy.
I've been practicing trying to say the name of your book, but I might just get you to do it.
Yeah, the name of the book is Tempêtes et Éclairs. Subtitle is kind of long, but Poésie d'Adolphe Duhart, écrivain créole de la Louisiane.
And can you show us the books? Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe it means something like thunder and lightning, or maybe thunder and a delicious snack. I'm not, is that the same word for both?
I actually think it is. That's something I've never actually looked into, but the lightning is the one we were going for. Yeah.
Okay, right. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So very nice book. And why don't you tell our folks what it is?
Yeah, so this book is a collection of poetry by the writer Adolphe Duhart, who I can give a bio of in a second, but the book itself is basically just all of his collected poetry that we know of at the moment, or that I was able to find in the 4 years that I was working on this book. It has an introduction and just a little bio on Duhart, and yeah.
And these are French, or are they French with an English translation, or are they in translation? What is the language of the book?
Yeah, the entire book is in French. So that has made some of my, family members and stuff unable to read it, but it is all completely in French because it was published with the Les Éditions Tintamarre, which is the French press out of Centenary College. All of their stuff is in French.
And there are occasional books that will be bilingual, like one language on one page, one on the other, but it's very rare because it's expensive, and so most people either choose to go with the French or they go with an English translation. You don't always, or usually don't get both. So I want to talk about the book a bit more, but first let's talk about you. So you actually were really remarkable. You did this research as an undergraduate. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's true. For all 4 years that I was at Centenary, I worked on this book and project, and it started out as just wanting to collect all of Duhart's poetry. My advisor and Professor Dana Kress, who runs the Tintamarre.
The great Dana Kress.
Yes, true. He's amazing in so many ways and has been a huge inspiration and mentor for me. So when we met when I was a freshman at Centenary, I was in a Louisiana literature class with him, and maybe not my freshman year, but maybe my sophomore year is when I took that class. But eventually he introduced me to Duhart and gave me this project essentially because he knew it was something that needed to be done because no one had ever collected this before. So I took 4 years at Centenary, going through the library and microfilms and all books that had ever been published on this topic, which are more than I expected, but still way too few. And
did you have to go to out-of-town archives? I know they got some good ones at Natchitoches, and there's a lot of stuff in Lafayette and a lot in New Orleans. Were you able to find all your stuff at Centenary, or did you have to take a road trip every now and then?
Yeah, I wish that I had been able to take a road trip because I mostly stayed at Centenary and used their microfilm. But by the time that I was actually prepared to all the background research that I could do just from my computer and at home, by the time that I was ready to go out and search for things, that's when COVID hit. So I actually wasn't able to ever. So I ended up having a lot of communication with librarians at I want to say it was University of New Orleans, and then I talked back and forth with some other libraries in New Orleans.
Probably Mary Lynn at Natchitoches. We just lost her. That's you don't think about staff as being, you know, a resource, but they really are. Like, she knew everything and could, you know, find it, help you find it.
That was extremely helpful. Just all the people that I was able to talk to and who were willing to go into the libraries and take scans of things for me, because I wasn't able to go myself. But of course, if I ever continued this project and wanted to go to these libraries, I'm sure there would be so much more to discover, because there's just nothing like getting in there yourself and going through those papers. But yeah.
Well, how did you discover this particular writer, and what really kind of turned you on to this writer in terms of, you know, what resonated with you in his work?
Yeah. Well, in general, first, I guess, I found Duhart specifically through Dana Kress, and he, you know, is so knowledgeable about all of these writers that he really was just like, I have some names that you should look into, and he just gave it to me right off the bat and said, look up Adolphe Duhart, he's really interesting, and there's not a lot on him out there, maybe you'll like it. And I did really like him, because what was the most interesting for me was that all of his poetry and short stories and the play that he wrote, anything that he published was written under a pseudonym, and the pseudonym was Lelia, and then it was like D.T. So in all the like writings about him, people assumed, or they were all on the same page as the fact that Lelia was Adolphe Duhart, but no one ever knows why he chose that pseudonym. So that was really interesting to me, because that's a female name, and a male writer in the 1800s writing under a female pseudonym was just really striking to me.
It usually goes the other way.
Right.
Like a female writer writing as a man, if you're doing the gender thing. So where was he from? New Orleans? Like, where's this guy from?
Right. So he was born in New Orleans, but his heritage traces back to Haiti and Saint Domingue and Cuba a little bit. I think that his parents were immigrants from Saint Domingue, as were a lot of people in this coterie kind of group that he was a part of. People now refer to
Les Nels by any chance?
He's a little later than Les Nels, so I think that was in the 1840s, 1845 or something, and he started publishing in 1860s. So there was probably some, you know, community built around Les Nels, but he was a little bit later publishing in newspapers.
Yeah, what were the main newspapers you found his poems in?
All of the ones that I found them in, well, not all of them, but the big one was La Tribune.
Yes. We talked to Mr. Rudnay. Is it Charles?
Mark? Was it Mark?
I think you're right, Stephen. Yeah. So yes, he's been working to bring that paper back, at least portions of it. So
that's awesome.
There are these things getting around the same thing, which is preserving Louisiana French, but Dana has done a yeoman's work. I wanted to talk about the project for a minute, and then we'll get back to your author. But this is part of, is it Tintamarre? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
So it's part of that, and it means ruckus, I think. But what's the significance for naming the project that, or did you ever find out?
Naming like the Tintamarre.
Yeah. What was the?
Right. I think that I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's because of how unique that is to Louisiana and Louisiana culture and Creole culture. I'm not from Louisiana actually, so I kind of have a transplant understanding of things, but
sometimes they give you insights that locals won't have. Where were you from originally?
I'm from Austin, Texas.
Oh, wow. So it was really a culture shock to get into this French Louisiana material, because until recently, all the people I knew that were studying French in Louisiana were studying French. They're like Baudelaire, they're reading the canon of French authors. And What Dana has done, and I guess it's over the last 20, maybe 25 years, is dig all these old texts out and put some of them on their website, but also a lot of them are being published as separate volumes. And so there's a whole kind of school emerged, the Tintamarre school. And I mean that in the kind of old-fashioned sense, like the school of Aristotle, because we'll have these interviewees on, and at some point, they're doing stuff in the Louisiana French, and I'll say, "Oh, they're doing this thing over at Centenary." Yeah, I used to work for Dana Kress, so he's getting a lot of scholars started, which I just think is a tremendous benefit. Like, you've got the books on the shelf now, or you can buy them. Or look them up online. But you've also got people that are pushing this forward in the realm of scholarship. So it's really becoming, we have kind of a renaissance of French language Louisiana material.
That's so true, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I also kind of gravitated towards Adolphe Duhart, this poet, but in general French at Centenary and French with Dana Kress, because it felt so new, but not actually new, just like rediscovering writers and history that like I had never known about, but then also people I knew from Louisiana had also never known about. And that kind of resurgence was just really appealing to me. And it feels so important because every time I look into a new author, there's some sort of connection to like broader American history at the time. So I feel like that's so valuable.
Yeah, like the Tribune, it was a very progressive newspaper put out by Creoles of color, as they call themselves, and very, took on really important issues. And when you read this stuff, it's just right out of today's headlines, a right-wing resurgence trying to take back whatever gains have been made and social progress. And then you've got some people fighting against it. And so, yeah, was he political at all?
Yeah, Duhart was definitely politically involved, and a lot of his poems have super progressive themes. And for me, there's like that side of his poetry, the political stuff, and then there's like a whole nother side that is like very romantic and very just like emotional and beautiful. And it definitely seems like I talk about the political stuff more, but just don't want to erase the fact that that is also there. But some of his poems like are very outspoken about race relations at the time, or pro civil rights, and a lot of them are very, I think that they're trying to inspire people essentially. So a lot of like, look to the future, continue fighting, everything will be okay if we just continue pushing back and fighting for what we know is right. And so I really love that too, because you don't think about that from the 1860s necessarily.
Well, it seems to be kind of a thing you see in the civil rights movement, or it's so grim so often, and we're entering into a really dark period of Jim Crow. But you have to be able to find the green shoots somewhere, the signs that it won't be this way forever. All right, you just give up and go home. I saw Vice President Harris speaking to, I think it was a women's group, African American. Last question from the audience was, well, tell us something hopeful. Here we are in this era of Trump and this horrible Supreme Court and all this, and we're in Louisiana. Well, we are. They weren't. But, what is hopeful in this moment that we can hold on to and make progress down the way? Would you like to read one of his poems and maybe tell us what it's about?
Yeah, let's see. I have, so another big thing definitely to plug before I get into my
Go
book.
ahead, yes, plug whatever you got.
So mine is Adolphe Duhart specifically, and his poems in French, but kind of been my Bible has been Clint Bruce's book, which you definitely probably heard of, Afro Creole Poetry in French, from Louisiana's radical Civil War era newspapers.
Yes, we brought him on a few years ago.
Really, I absolutely admire Clint.
Clint Bruce.
Yeah, Clint Bruce.
Yeah. We definitely talked to him. And was he studying under Dana at one point? Do I remember that?
Yeah, he was like years before me, obviously, but through Dana, we've kind of had some back and forth conversations when I was working on this book, and he's just amazing. And this book has translations in English.
I remember, he has a French language blog also that people might be interested in reading his posts. He let us put up a couple of things on our website, and we let them know that it's there and point them in that direction. We try to let people know what's going on. So you used Clint kind of as a guide. Well, good.
So I was just going to say, if you wanted me to read one from his English translation rather than the French, but I could also read the French.
Maybe we could do both.
Okay.
I've been practicing French on Duolingo every day, and very little sticks, but a little bit does.
Yeah.
Bienvenue, Louisiana podcast. Did I just say podcast? But it should be Bienvenue Podcast Louisiana. I think that would be kind of close. Yeah, right. Don't want to embarrass the host, but you don't have to, because I embarrassed myself. All right, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to pick one. It's kind of long, but I think this is my favorite one. So I can do the French first.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the title is Espérance, by Lélia D. or Adolphe Duhart. It has a epigraph which reads: Poète, vous rêvez et vous voyez sans doute dans vos rêves charmants l'avenir inconnu qu'on sécrète en doute dans ce verre de tourment. And the poem begins: Non, je n'ai pas rêvé, non, ce n'est pas un songe, enfant du paisible sommeil qui révèle, oh wow, my French is rough, qui révèle à ma lyre en un charmant mensonge l'aurore à l'orient vermeil. La tempête est passée, et dans la nuit qui tombe, en laissant le ciel entrouvert, mon regard a suivi dans son vol la colombe, ton enfant la rameau vert. Et j'ai souri joyeux dans le fond de mon âme, mes pleurs étaient évanouis à ce doux messager qui porterait le dictame pour calmer nos mots à nuit. Et puis au cœur meurtri, si belle est l'espérance, qu'il ne faut pas désespérer, l'homme serait-il né dans un jour de souffrance pour blasphémer et pour pleurer? Le seul but, il est vrai que le sort lui propose, porte l'empreinte du malheur, et qui ne peut monter que son pied ne pose sur l'échelon de la douleur. La vie est pour nous une chose imparfaite. Nul n'est heureux, notre triomphant, les pleurs brûlent nos yeux même au sein d'une fête, et trouble les yeux de l'enfant. Mais au milieu de l'ombre, au travers de la brume, le clair midi surgit aux cieux, et l'oiseau captif jette aux dômes qui s'allument ses accords plus harmonieux. Nous verrez-vous par votre oreille endormie à ces profonds ébranlements, et votre lutte écho du son Jérémie n'a-t-il que des gissements? Espérez et croyez, Lincoln, nouvelle hostie choisie entre tous les élus, en ce val d'exil où son œuvre convertie, il libérera comme Jésus. Oui,
L'Éternel voyant la faiblesse des hommes, les joies, ses lois ici-bas, le faux dessiné dans le gouffre où nous sommes, éclaire chacun de nos pas. Croyez donc au poète en ce divin symbole, gravé dans tous cœurs désolés, et cet espoir caché dans une parabole, qui pleure serait consolé. So that was French. That was quite long. But
such a beautiful language. Who woke up one morning and said, we should make sure that we stomp out French in Louisiana? You know, it was just like, usually the French speakers in a land will fight tooth and claw to hold on to their stuff. And we just kind of gave away our patrimony. You know, I believe every Louisiana kid should grow up speaking English and French, you know, like they do in Quebec.
Yeah, it's coming back though. It feels like the last 4 years since well, 6 years now since I've been acquainted with Centenary. I've been more aware of the fact that Louisiana immersion schools and education is just booming, and I think that's great.
And there's an attempt to bring it back to the marketplace, like do tours in French. Like if you go to, I think the Whitney has French language tours. Maybe what's the one by the Whitney that deals with Compare Le Pen, Stephen? Laura Plantation.
Laura.
Places like that. So yeah, okay. So now you want to read us the English version?
Yes.
I was really hoping I would understand more than I did. It was I'm better at reading French than I am at speaking it. So
well, me too, and I apologize to all of my French teachers in the past for how bad some of that probably was. It's been 2 years since I've been in like a true setting where I've gotten to speak French, so there was probably some mistakes there, but so this is the English translation by Clint Bruce in his collection of Afro-Creole poetry. The title is Hope by Lélia D, and the epigraph is, you dream, O poet, and surely do behold in all your dreams delights, the future secrets, feared though unforetold, in the valley of our plights. No, I didn't dream. No, it's no fantasy. O child of sleepful rest, who reveals to my lyre, retelling a charming lie, the dawn of ruby-colored east. The storm has passed, and as the night fell o'er the sky, still lying half open, my eye pursued the flight of a dove that bore a branch, tender and green. My tears had dissipated, and I smiled, joyous throughout my soul's expanse, at the soft messenger bringing a balm to calm our indescribable torments. And though one's heart be wounded, how alluring it is the hope that it must keep. Might man be born on a day of suffering merely to blaspheme and weep? It's true, the mark of grief has been engraved upon the goal set out by fate. To climb it all onto the rungs of pain, it's forced to set its feet. None is happy, none triumphant. For all of us, life's but an imperfect thing. Our tears disturb our childhood games, and even at parties our eyes will sting. But amidst these shadows, through the fog and the mist, the day-bright noon attacks the skies, and the captive bird throws towards the burning dome its best-tuned harmonies. Alone shall you not open your sleeping ear to those shocks that cause the ground to shudder, and as your lute, echoing Jeremy's gloom, alone only moans left to utter. Hope and believe, Lincoln, a host renewed, among the elected, elevated, in exile's veil, did have his work transformed. Like Jesus, he liberated. Yes, the Eternal One, when seeing men's failings, his laws for us decreed. In the pit where we stand, the fire of Sinai will light the path we tread. Believe, O poet, in the symbol divine that's carved in every ravaged heart, in this hope kept hidden within a parable. Whoever weeps shall be given comfort. So
that's beautiful.
I like that poem a lot because it is beautiful, but it kind of shows how this group of poets, Adolphe was just Duhart was just one of them, but that epigraph came from a different poem by another poet in the group named Lucien Mansion, a poem of his in which he is kind of going back and forth with Duhart in these poems that are published in La Tribune. And in that poem that he uses as an epigraph, Manson is kind of like pushing back on Duhart's relentless like belief that the future will be as hopeful and bright as he believes it is. And so this poem is a reaction to that. And I just feel like it's so wonderful in the sense that it's recognizing how people are suffering and recognizing that things are not perfect just yet at the time in which they're reading this, but that it will be better in the future if we continue to fight. And Lincoln is referenced in there, and I think that's also really important because Lincoln becomes kind of this figure.
What year would that poem have been published? Do you have that?
Yeah, that was in 1868, January 3rd, 1868.
So it's right in the middle of some of the worst violence of the terrorist reaction to the civil rights that are being passed. But we're in the middle also of the greatest advances in those rights. Like it's another almost 10 years before they start rolling them back. So it really looks hopeful now if we can just, shoot enough of these Confederates who won't give up. They sent them home with their guns. What they think would happen.
Well, and it's emblematic too of every time there's any kind of social progress, usually by a vulnerable group. They can be African American, they can be Latino, they can be women, even students, or whatever. But any group like that, when there's any kind of progress, then you get the reactionary forces rising up. To do what you just said, to commit violent acts, but also to they speak very violent words as well. If you notice their rhetoric, like in the news, in news magazines, newspapers, TV, etc., their rhetoric is very violent.
Yeah, I remember
that's kind of the template for all this.
We worked on, one of my students spoke French. He was from West Africa, and French was his first language. I can't remember what country, but we worked on the text of the Marseillaise Noir, but he translated it into English. And compared to the original French Marseillaise, which is, blood flowing in the fields, it was a very peaceful poem. Like, it wasn't calling for the kind of violent revolt that the original did. I noticed the difference in tone.
Well, that connects a lot too. I feel like, and I'm not perfect here with all of my information about these poets and their involvement in like politics at the time, but it does seem that a lot of their political involvement and involvement in the community revolves around like education and discourse and poetry, and trying to really get in and understand like the system that you're working with and build a community from the ground up based on like values of liberté, égalité, and fraternité. And a great example of that is the school that they founded that allowed free admission for Black orphans in New Orleans. So they're really trying to start that from the ground up and implement like systems that get at the civil rights movement early on.
Louisiana had I guess it was in our country, a unique 3-tier caste system. You had the enslaved masses, and then you had the white, either owners or they worked for the owners. But you had this mixed race people of color, and many of them had a pretty good bit of money. Some of them owned slaves themselves. And at this point, I believe it was Mr. Rudnay was telling us that the paper that had to make the decision, like, are we going to try to maintain our third level? And they decided instead to identify with the mass of newly freedmen and try to bring them along, like provide them with education and jobs and civil rights, rather than trying to just grab something strictly for themselves. So it was an important group of people that made Louisiana have a little more advantage compared to a lot of the other states, where there was no, these were people who had been involved in civic matters for years, so they were ready to hop in there and do stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In the Tintamarre, sorry, the Tribune is very like outspoken about that exact thing of like taking all people of color, whether they had been enslaved or not, and creating this community going forward. Because a lot of these, or actually, if I'm not mistaken, all of the poets in this Afro-Creole poetry community were always people of color that were free, because they had been immigrants from Haiti and Cuba. So they had never been enslaved in the United States, but like you said, chose to identify with, all people of color and move forward with that understanding that we're all equal, because of that, in spite of that,
Yeah, we have one of their editorials on our website by who was it? I guess it was by Louis Rudenay, and he had written this: is the Black Code still in effect? Because they had all these Code Noir, Código Negro, Black codes, and Louisiana was trying to push them back, get them back in shape. But the thing is, as you read through the article, it's like something you would read in today's newspaper. Like it's so relevant, and sadly so. Like all this time, and we've made so little progress. But we still keep at it. The Confederate monument speech that Mayor Landrieu gave, I stayed up late transcribing it. They had like a kind of a rough draft that they circulated ahead of time, but I was sitting there running the tape back, and just wanted to get exactly what he actually said. And the most interesting changes were in the intro, because it just started off in the print version, well, thank you everybody for being here, but then he's looking around the room and actually thanking people who were there extemporaneously. And one of the people he recognizes is Keith Plessy. Plessy, as in Plessy v. Ferguson, and he is, I think, a nephew, and he and Phoebe Ferguson started the Plessy and Ferguson Foundation to try to educate Louisianans about civil rights and put up plaques that honor the good parts of our history instead of the terrible ones. And so, they're still fighting that fight. And a year or two later, they're up there again. We don't have this on the site yet, but it's a ceremony where the governor pardons Homer Plessy, and now that has been officially kind of undone, and it was a way of not just recognizing what he had done, but what people today are still doing. So there's a continuity, and what you're doing is providing that link that people can find. There'll be people who are descended from the poets in your, that you're studying.
Yeah. That's exactly what I hope to do with this kind of work, is just make that connection and show that this tradition of literature being connected to civil rights goes back to the point, or a point when not a lot of people realize it, or they don't study it in school as like part of the canon that they study, and make that link and make that connection. But then also, like you're saying, I think that it would be really exciting to be able to talk to people who are descendants from these writers and fill in a lot of like gaps in our cultural understandings, but then also just understanding of scholars, because a lot of the information out there is yet to be discovered about what all was going on for this group of poets.
Who were some of the poets' inspirations when he began his career? Were you able to find that kind of those little granular details like that?
Kind of, but only in ways that I'm kind of assuming, because a lot of poets in this group were educated in France, and I do know that Duhart was educated like in his youth in France. So the people that he's reading are like Lamartine and Victor Hugo and people in the French Revolution that are big figures like that. So only kind of. So a lot of the poems, or all of the poems, are in French Romantic traditions, and very stylistically so. So I would say that French classics basically, but I do assume that there's a lot of just communal inspiration, in the sense that there's a lot of poets that are clearly working together at like the school, or have fought in the Civil War together, or just are in different kinds of groups, and they're kind of inspiring each other in that way.
Yeah, kind of cross-pollination, very essentially. Yeah.
The oldest civil rights poem we can find was collected by De Dune in his book, and it's from the Battle of New Orleans, and it's a protest against Andrew Jackson betraying because he promised the enslaved men that if you fight for us, we'll free you. And then afterward, he said, well, if I borrowed a man's mule to use in the war, I'd have to give it back. And so that was his reasoning. So it's just very dehumanizing. And so we've got this basically 200-year-old civil rights poem. So it's been going on a while. And part of the rhetoric of the South has always been, well, back in the day, the slaves, they were happy, and well, no, it's always been a fight, for freedom. And sometimes you get a little further than others, but it's always been there, like when you start looking.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's something that, like me coming from Texas and having a very limited kind of view from what the story is, the narrative is about the Civil War, or this whole thing. That's why another reason it was really exciting for me to take on this project.
I just, like, within the last few months, and I'm 65 years old, and I just found out the reason for the Texas Revolution. Have you heard this?
Tell me.
Mexico was ending slavery, and all the slave owning Anglos that had moved into the Texas region of Mexico decided they wanted to keep their slaves. So it wasn't a fight for freedom or liberty, it was a fight for slavery. And it just blew my mind, like, oh my God, well, of course it was. I should have always known that, but that's not what you hear. The Mexicans, they're so very, very corrupt, you see, and we had to, but no, it was the same thing they always fight for. So.
Yeah, it always seems to come back to that in some way, and it's really sad that how deeply ingrained some of these ideas are in just everybody.
Well, I know, and also within the last year, I learned that the Ursuline nuns, the way they got money, it wasn't that they needed continuing offerings. The states and the companies they worked with set them up with some plantations, and these were being worked by slaves, and they never let them go, not until the government came in 1865, and said, no, they're free now. But that's how they were funded. And then you've got this, okay, there's a lot of good they're doing, but there's this thing over here, and gosh, I'm still working through it, I don't know quite what to think yet. I wanted to talk digital humanities with you because Louisiana Anthology, that's a digital humanities. Had you stumbled across our stuff before, or is this your first encounter?
I honestly can't remember. So I feel like, yes, I have. But if I could go back into my notes from 5 years ago, and I just was accumulating links and links and links.
Yeah.
And just like going through Google, like 40 pages back on results and just anything I could find. So certainly, but it wasn't until you reached out that I went back and kind of
looked over it again.
Yeah.
Well, also, they've got it in, of course, the Centenary Tintamarre has a digital humanities branch. But then you moved to, was it University of North Carolina? And don't they have the
documenting the American South or something?
Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with that while you were there? Like, given your background?
Yeah, so I didn't have anything to do with it in the sense like I contributed to it or but as a student it was definitely something that I returned to time and time again. So at UNC I just graduated with my master's and I worked under Eliza Richards, who is an amazing 19th century poetic scholar, and she pointed me to that documenting the American South, particularly with studying other African American writers early on, such as George Moses Horton, who was really important to North Carolina, but then others throughout the South. And so I definitely frequented that site. It was, I am all for the idea of putting these things out here digitally as much as possible. Another thing that I used a lot was just like the Library of Congress's newspapers, archives, and that kind of thing. So
our last week's episode was on the Ursuline Correspondence, which is a letter the Ursuline nuns, it was a petition, they all signed it, and sent it to President Jefferson asking that their property be protected by the new American administration. And Claiborne wrote a cover letter to the governor and said these are great women and they're teaching young girls and keeping them from vice, which probably means prostitution, I would imagine. And then Jefferson writes back. And the only place it was online when we started this project was the Library of Congress in scanned, handwritten, just really kind of wretched copies. And so we worked on that a while. It's not that long, but it took a pretty good while to transcribe. So, but yeah, if it hadn't been there, I don't know if we'd have been able to find it anywhere. So yeah, Library of Congress has a lot of good stuff. Some of it is, most of it's in print, I think. Early Louisiana letters between Jefferson and the people down in the territory, and you can put these on your website because they're part of our history too. And some of it is actually in French. I don't think any of documenting the American South is in French, if I recall. I've looked around a pretty good bit, and I don't think I've found any French.
Is that documenting the American South, is that strictly historical text, or is any of that contemporary, contemporary writing of any sort? Do you know?
I'm not sure how far into the future it goes, but I feel like it's mostly historical text. Yeah.
Up to the early 20th century, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because I'm thinking right now, and of course I'm thinking 21st century, but this is one of the most diverse parts of the country. If you look at the South as an entity from, say, Virginia, West Virginia down to Texas, it's as big as Western Europe, maybe even bigger, but it is a massive, geographic area or geographic region, and up into, say, Arkansas, maybe southern Missouri, and maybe Oklahoma, definitely eastern Oklahoma and southern Oklahoma, say the part bordering Arkansas and Texas. And it's a huge region of the country, but it's also extremely diverse. I mean, it's not just what used to be, African Americans, Anglos, and so forth. I mean, it's a lot more diverse than that today, with Asians, Latinos, various other groups that have come out of Eastern Europe, etc. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot more to document and put out there and fill in a lot of those gaps in history. And I'm sure I've messed around on this site some, but it's really extensive. So that's
there's right here in this state, it's the wildest thing. I was doing genealogy here, and I'm strictly a dabbler. I don't do it professionally or anything. I'm just doing it for personal reasons. And I got to looking at mine and my sister's, my biological mother, my sister's mother. got to looking at one of her first cousins, and she's from a very tiny community here in Louisiana. It's concentrated around New Orleans, but she's Croatian of all things. This woman is Croatian, this cousin. So she's some sort of standard Anglo. I think they maybe are Scots-Irish, but her mother's people were Croatian of all things. And somehow some of those Croatians landed here in North Louisiana.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's the wildest thing. I wasn't looking for that, and I saw this name, and they had to anglicize the thing heavily. It was like TSHOPP or something. Anyhow, they changed it to CHOP or CHOPP, but it became CHOP. But it's actually a Croatian surname.
Yeah, New Orleans had a lot of the same immigration patterns as the cities of the Northeast. That's why the Yad accent sounds a lot like the Brooklyn accent. The same folks were moving into both places, and so yeah, we've got a lot of diversity here. So down the road, are you interested in more digital humanities, or was this a one-off for you? Like a lot of people are making their career in this these days.
I mean, I have no idea what's in store for me moving forward. I definitely am not putting this stuff down in any way, and I'm trying to figure out the best way for me to go about this. But I do think that the digital humanities is definitely part of the future, because having these things accessible online, like that's how people engage with stuff more than anything else. So I am so interested in that. And as an independent scholar now, and if I ever go back to academia, I want to find more avenues to talk about this stuff besides just the print book.
Well, there are a lot of possible new projects, plus a lot of, like Stephen and I are not getting any younger. So, we need younger scholars in the game who can take up the torch when we drop it.
Yeah, I'm excited that more and more people are even talking about Louisiana literature, but I mean, yeah, honestly, that in itself is just amazing to me, that in the last couple of months, I've had more people reach out, or I've seen more things just like through the grapevine about this stuff, and it was not like that 6 years ago, so I can't imagine where it'll be.
Our website, during COVID, we actually got up to 1 month where we had 8,000 people visit our website. And this is from literally all around the world. Not every country every month, but in over a period of time, every country comes here. And how many books are going to sell that much on and even in the summer, even after COVID, like we're bumping on 3,000 visitors a month, just as kind of the ambient. And then when September hits and schools start using it, the numbers will go up again. And it does get the information into the hands of people who otherwise wouldn't even know it's there, much less be able to afford it. Like, one book may not cost a lot, but if you only have 100, it starts to add up. So it's all right there for free. And we got something cool. You want to see something cool?
Yeah.
I don't know if we've shown our listeners this. No, it's not supposed to be me on the buggy. Here we go. So this is the original Louisiana Purchase Treaty. Got a little bit of the treaty there, but as you scroll down and come to the text, they're side by side, French and English. And you can notice some interesting differences, like our version starts out with the president, their version starts out with Napoleon.
Look at the titles. The titles aren't even the same. The American or the English version says treaty between the U.S. or United States and the French Republic. And the right-hand column, the B column, says treaty between France and the United States.
Right, yeah. So,
so right out of the gate, it's a different emphasis.
But if you have a smartphone and it's not wide enough, this thing will pop back into a single column. So you can read, I think we have the English first, then the French for every paragraph as you go through it. So I just figured out the code to do that last year. So, but there's a lot of stuff out there like that we would like to do that with. That's the one we have done so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. I'm excited to see what else is on your site.
We have
over 9 million words, so you can go in there and get lost very quickly, very easily.
And we have, if you look in the languages and click on French, you can see all of our French stuff at once. And also we have some French Creole, and that's in another. You can look at all of it at once if you're just wanting to find out what the French is we have.
Awesome.
And of course, most of it is old, but we do have a few things that have been posted by bloggers and things that we were able to get permission to cross-post. So yeah, and the big drawback to digital humanities is people don't always understand them. Centenary, somehow Dana was able to convince the rest of the school to let this happen. But like a lot of schools, that's when they come to do tenure, they don't look at that. What is that, a web page? Where's your scholarly article? So you have to be aware of that kind of stuff. Are you thinking about a PhD, or have you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm done. I definitely thinking about that. I actually went to UNC with the intention of getting a PhD, and then decided that it would be best to take it one step at a time and kind of reevaluate, like, what exactly do I want to do with this work. And it's becoming clear that this kind of archival research and recovery work is definitely what I want to do. And so maybe finding a place that allows me to do that. Maybe Louisiana is the one. It was hard, being at North Carolina, wanting to kind of study this stuff, but I just didn't know what I wanted to focus on. So now, if that's the case, I just need to, really focus and be critical about where I move.
Yeah, and you have to decide, do you want to get a PhD in French, or do you want to get a PhD in library science and archive kind of stuff? It sounds like you'll need that skill set.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the good thing is, in North Carolina, I had some experience with the libraries and took some classes that opened that door. And it was really exciting. So maybe that's what I should focus on. And I really loved all the librarians and archivists that I ever talked to. Were just some of the most helpful people in the world. So I would love to be part of that.
Yeah, they want to spread the information, the good ones, the ones. Well, there are the librarians that want all the books on the shelves and it real quiet. But that's not the norm down here. Yeah, I find that they want to be helpful, and a lot of places have a historian or a library that looks into the history of the local area and has all this stuff collected. You won't find much French up here, but you find some in Natchitoches in their archives, because they were Creoles all the way back. Like it was the first place set up by the French. That's in Louisiana now. Our oldest city, and had French for a very long time. Well, would you like to read one more poem while we've got you on the phone or the Zoom?
Let's see.
And I would ask too, was he strictly a poet, or did he write anything else, like essays, novels, anything else, any other form?
So he wrote a couple of short stories, or one of them might be considered like a novella length, and those can be found via the Tintamarre and some of their publications. And then he also published they're kind of like prose poems. And And then he also published, or not published, but a play of his is reported to have been written. He was also an actor and involved in the theater, but I'm not sure. I've never been able to find a copy of that, so I'm not sure if one has survived. But certainly more than just poetry, but he was extremely prolific poetry writer, probably the most prolific of the group.
And I like the technical side of poetry. So what kind of poems did he write? Like what meter or rhyme scheme or anything like that?
They kind of vary. I say I study poetry, but some of those things are lost on me because I'm kind of more the historical thinker here than the poetic. But they're in a French romantic style, so they're all do have a very set meter and rhyme scheme. What they are, I'm not exactly sure. But they are.
French is it's pronounced so differently than it's written. Like English, you can kind of look at the words and see where the how many syllables there are, but you know what is going on here with this. I drop out the last half the word most of the time anyway, so I would have a lot of trouble analyzing French literature.
Yeah, that is something that if I ever went back would also need to really try and focus on, because at Centenary I did this project, but in my classes I focused mostly on French prose and not just French, but I read a lot from Africa and the Caribbean, and but mostly novels. And so I would have to go back and understand all that.
Folk tales?
Kind of, but I think in my French Louisiana literature class at Centenary, we talked about that, but I haven't ever dove into it too much.
Yeah, the thing like the Tar Baby, we have a Creole version of that, and of course everybody's familiar with the rather minstrelly Uncle Remus version, but the one in French Creole, I think it's Senegal. The story is almost exactly the same. Like you've got these people living over the, down the hill from the levee that's keeping the river from washing them away, and it's a story about savannah and all of the animals from Africa, that very much like the population of Lion King. You've got the king lion, you've got the macaque, you've got the hyena, Buki, and so they were able to preserve this orally for decades until it got written down. And it's quite an amazing, to go, if you're interested in the West African the folk stories, to look at the Creole, French Creole folk stories. And most of them are also in English, so if you're having trouble, I always cheat. But I mean, if you read it out loud, it's kind of like reading Chaucer out loud. If you're studying English, kind of understand what they're saying a little better.
Yeah, that's how I feel about French too. But it is so beautiful. French poetry, the way that it rolls off your tongue.
Yeah.
So amazing. But I love the idea of the folk tales. That sounds super interesting. I love that the way that the culture is always linked back to something so deeply connected. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and there's a part too that's fascinating. It's the Tar Baby, and then in the next part he gets married. But it's totally an American story, because all of a sudden there's a river that's huge. In the first story, it was Savannah and it was dry and they had to dig a well. And now they got this huge river. That's the, of course, Mississippi. And they've got a Aesop's fable thrown in there about why dogs smell each other's asses. I said, this can't be, this just sounds, and I looked it up. It's been in Western Europe for millennia. Then they had a priest marrying compare Le Pen to a rich white bunny rabbit, and then consternation. Some of the baby rabbits were black, And the priest says, or the king says, oh, compare Le Pen. Sometimes those white rabbits have black babies. And it was just such a Louisiana story. Like every part of it is from some situation here. It's compared to the story that they had preserved intact for all those generations. So it's kind of an interesting, like, why was one the same and why was one like, so different? And obviously composed here. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
I'll let you have your French poem.
Okay. So this one is a little shorter and is to give an example kind of that the other side of Duhart's poetry that is not as political but more about romance and that kind of thing. So the poem is L'amour.
Oh.
This is actually interesting because I attribute it. Oh, go ahead.
I understood that.
Yes, very good. I attribute this to Duhart, and Clint Bruce in his book attributes it to Duhart as well, but it was written under a different pseudonym than Lélia. It was written under Berthe Duhart. So kind of an interesting idea that Duhart might have been using multiple pseudonyms throughout his life, and the fact that there might be more poems out there that could be attributed to him in the future. So yeah, L'amour, and it starts with this quote. What is love? An inexpressible thing, a volume in a word, an ocean in a tear, a whirlwind in a sigh. L'amour, l'amour, vois-tu, c'est un doux sentiment qui, sans réflexion, se forme dans notre âme, sans empare soudain, l'attache uniquement et la fait rayonner d'une secrète flamme. C'est un foyer ardent. C'est une passion qui se nourrit d'espoir, de folles illusions et des rêves brillants d'une indicible ivresse par qui tu secoues colère et par qui tu caresses. C'est une passion qui rend indifférent, jaloux, capricieux, cruel, désespérant, tout autre qui n'est pas l'objet de notre culte. C'est que son amour seul nous embellit la vie. Mystique vision de toute âme asservie qui répond à jamais et toute joie au cœur. Et pur ravissement et délice et bonheur. L'amour, mais sans amour, que serait l'existence? C'est que l'amour est tout. Frénésie à venir. Sauve émotion, éternel souvenir. Mais l'amour, c'est la foi, c'est l'amour, l'espérance. And then, in English, love. It starts also with, what is love? An inexpressible thing, a volume in a word, an ocean in a tear, a whirlwind in a sigh. What is love? Love, you see, is a feeling most sweet. Without forethought, it forms within our soul, and suddenly seizes it, binding its hands and feet, and makes it glow like a hidden burning coal. It is a blazing hearth. It is a passion which feeds on hope, the folly of illusion, and dreams that gleam with unspeakable drunkenness, coloring all things, inhabiting each caress. It is a passion that renders indifferent, capricious, jealous, and cruel, inducing dejection in all who are not the object of our affection. For that love alone can make our life beautiful, a mystical vision for any subdued soul, discharging into the heart an endless bliss, and ecstasy's pure pleasure and happiness. O love, for lacking love, what life have we? For love is everything, excitement, the future, emotions so tender, memories forever. But truly love is faith, 'tis hope come softly. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And a lot of his poems are like this and just really beautiful. A lot of them talk about the love, not just for one's romantic partner, but for family, and particularly the love for one's mother, which I think is nice. So, yeah.
How well known was he in his lifetime? Was he very well known or very appreciated for his artistry or whatever?
I think, well, for all of them, I think that they're really well known within New Orleans, obviously. I think he was well known in the sense that he had a hand in many different places in the community, such as at the school, and then in religious circles. And he was also just an educator in general, like a solo practitioner of like tutoring people and that kind of thing. So I think he was well known for, oh, and he was an actor. So he was well known for that. And I can't say 100%. There are a lot of back and forth poems between him and other poets in the circle. So it seems as if this group is all reading and talking to each other and kind of well known in that sense. But it's really hard to connect like beyond New Orleans or beyond Louisiana. And it's hard to know how well read he would have been. But he's definitely recognized like in books kind of from that time. People reference him almost constantly. So
yeah, a lot of the English language poetry we find from that era is really bad. So it's good to find somebody who can write a good poem, because a lot of them we have on our site for historical reasons, but not for aesthetic ones so much. But his really, the French sounds beautiful. You know, you can tell it's a well-written poem. Well, did you have any, I see we've been going about an hour. Did you have any last things you'd like to bring up? Maybe anything you want to plug, or any points we didn't get to that you'd like to make?
I feel like I kind of talked about him in a very like full way. I mean, my biggest thing with them was these poets has always been just giving their voices a new life, because all of these poems have were only ever published in newspapers, and they're only now just getting to the point where they're being republished and having brand new access. So any time that books like this one are out there, or others on the Tintamarre, or Clint Bruce's book that translates these into English, or things like this on the internet that makes these things more widely accessible, I think that that's my biggest mission, because there's still so much more to be discovered about this group.
I've been downloading stuff kind of there are all these Comptes Rendus, Latany, Louisiane, which is it was a French language. I'm not sure. It was kind of between a magazine and a journal, and you know, it went on for decades, and there's just tons of French language stuff in there that's, I don't know, they're probably working on it up at Centenary, but
was that the one that Forche had a hand in? That Alice Forche?
I think so, yeah. I think he was the editor. Comptes Rendus, or my pronunciation of it. So have you stumbled across these?
No, I don't think I have.
And you would think, I mean, it might be that this was mostly Creoles who were considered white, as opposed to, so his poetry might not be in their thing, but you know, it goes back, I think, to the 1880s. But
and lasts into the early 20th century. Is that the one?
Yeah. I think maybe a 40-year run, something like that. You know, Google has digitized all this stuff, but it's kind of done so in a wretched way. So it really needs some editor to come along and put into a format like our format. We designed it in the winter of 2011. The significance is that I had a smartphone at that time, and wanted to have a site that I could read on my smartphone. So it's smartphone friendly, and a lot of the older sites that were designed in the 90s, some of them are going back and refactoring, but some of them just left them the way they are. And so, yeah, about half of our traffic is from handheld devices, as opposed to using laptops and stuff. I don't know what I was talking about. Just kind of, well, you know, things you have to think about. Like my when I started my website, there were barely cell phones. You know, it was very extravagant to have a cell phone back in the 90s, you know, and something Californians did, but very few people I knew had one. So, and if you did, you couldn't get the internet on it. So, yeah, things have changed. So, yeah, you want stuff that's accessible. But they've done kind of the first step. They've gone in and digitized all this stuff, but then there's just like so much work left to do, and you just despair of ever. But on the other hand, you got plenty to keep you busy through your whole career if you do decide to go down the digital, digital humanities road, and it would give you a good excuse to come back to Louisiana. I was going to suggest the Louisiana Studies Conference is in September at Natchitoches every year. That would be a great place to go and, you know, talk about your author and the book and that kind of stuff. And the great thing about that conference is everybody there is interested in Louisiana. So I've had, you know, I've gone to pop culture thing and been giving my paper on Kate Chopin. It was so grim. You know, they're there for sci-fi and margaritas on Bourbon Street. They aren't there for my thing. So might have had 6 people. So audience is really important. These people also, you can make connections, like get friends throughout the state, because it's the same people show up there year after year, and if you get plugged into them, they can help you with your research down the road. So yeah, Louisiana Studies Conference in Natchitoches, September. It's it's not that pricey. Like I think it's $50 to join, and then you can find a nice hotel for $120 a night. Probably a lot for a grad student, but yeah, I would look into that, because I have, they would love what you're talking about, and kind of get some of it too. So that's good.
And I think that sounds really nice, because it feels like there's probably a lot of like educators at this thing, and I think that's another huge part of this for me, is that like having the book out there is great, but I would love for more people to be able to use that in like even high school French classes, or in colleges, and be able to start using that more and more for you know, who are we reading, and integrating that into the conversation.
One part of our website is teacher resources, where
That's awesome.
we go from just taking pictures of something, but then at one end we have really well written lesson plans that go for a month or 6 weeks. And if you ever develop stuff that you want to post somewhere, we'll be glad to put it up on our teacher aids, and whatever you have would be great. It doesn't have to be in any, like I say, some of it's in great shape. They've got the lesson plan and everything. The stuff Stephen and I do, yeah, we walked through some woods and took some pictures here. So yeah, but it's keeps people interested when you can put a picture up of, oh, this is what that place looked like.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. I think that that's so useful, and also does so much for spreading the word about the stuff.
We've been very concerned about getting Louisiana, I mean, that's how we got started, was getting Louisiana literature in, not just before the public, but into schools, both K through 12 and college. And so the lesson plans are just kind of part of our, what we'd like to have more of them. But I don't know how to write a lesson plan. So what happens is occasionally I'll teach Louisiana literature as a senior level and also grad level, and they're usually four or five English teachers from around the state who can write good lesson plans. So I divide them up into groups and put each teacher with experience in charge of one of the groups, and then they tell the other people what to do, and then they're in charge of putting it together as a lesson plan. So yeah, So we've got a way forward. It's just slower than you'd like it to be, but everything's slower than you'd like it to be.
Certainly.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation, and I love the topic, and I really like, like, I'm really very much appreciate Dana keeping an eye out for young scholars and kind of helping you guys, like, okay, this is something that hasn't been done. But when you do it, you have a place to put it. Like, we've got this press, and you can get into the shape for the press, and we can print it up and publish it and get it out there. So it gives you more of an incentive to go ahead and do it if you know at the end of it the work's going to be recognized. So yeah, it's just such great work y'all are doing at the Tintamarre.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
one more time, show us your book.
Yes, absolutely. And I absolutely second everything you're saying about the Tintamarre and Dana, Kress, and everybody that's just doing this stuff about Louisiana and French and French history or Louisiana history. It's so great to me that this kind of thing is allowing for some voices that have been historically erased to come back into the conversation. So
Yeah,
that's all I care about.
This guy never wrote this book in his lifetime. You had to put it together yourself and find it on all these databases. And did you have physical papers you could look through, or was it all like stuff online?
For me, it was almost all online, except for I do know that those papers exist. I just wasn't able to get to them, but all of them have been, they're either newspapers or they were things that other people had copied from a newspaper and wrote it down because
transcriptions.
They're obviously aware of the fact that these things will get lost and destroyed if we don't, take proper precautions to write them down. So
one thing they did is kind of a make work thing in the WPA and the Depression was a lot of people, my grandfathers, one was a carpenter, one was a bricklayer, but if you're scholastic type, they had something for you. Get these old newspapers from the decades earlier and then type them up. It looks just like a manual typewriter and save them at the, I guess it was maybe Lewis, the library at LSU, but now they're on Lewis, and you can find a lot of this stuff that's, if you can't find the original article, they've retyped it. And it seemed like what are you even doing this for? But now with the internet, scan all that stuff and you get the words out there. But what you're doing makes it much more accessible.
I appreciate you saying that.
No, because nobody's going to do all the work you did. It's just, that's just a lot. So now you've taken your research and put it together and people can read it. And, I would encourage everybody to go out and buy it. Support our local scholars. We appreciate you doing the work. It's an important thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing in so many ways. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing and
thanks.
giving me the chance to talk about my stuff.
I know, right? Most places, if you get up to talk, they give you maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We like to go for an hour and just get into the details of it. So, thank you so much. It's been really great meeting you.
You as well. Thank you guys so much. And
thank you for joining us.
Of course. I hope to talk again sometime.
I was going to say, whenever you do something, that's germane to what we're doing, give us a holler and we'll have you back on. We just talked to Katie Morla Shannon for the 4th time, because she's prolific. She's kind of hit her stride, but when you do something, let us know and we'll be glad to have you back. Help you publicize it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.